Tonight, we break down a high-stakes debate unfolding in the U.S. Senate over voter ID legislation and the future of the filibuster. At the center of this discussion are prominent lawmakers, including Susan Collins, John Thune, and Chuck Schumer, and references to Donald Trump. Supporters argue the proposal strengthens election integrity. Critics call it unnecessary or even harmful. What's really at stake? Policy, politics, or the balance of power ahead of the midterms? Let's take a closer look at the claims, the context, and the implications.
Look, I think right now, America's made their voices very clear. They want voter ID, and I really will take a second to commend Senator Collins. She was the 50th representative to sign on to this, and this is a massive piece of legislation. So I'm going to be personally sending her 50 roses for Valentine's Day, because she's America's Valentine's for that. But moving forward, look, Senator Thune has every ability to bring the standing filibuster to the floor. I know he famously came out maybe a few days ago and said that they might not have the time to do it. And I would actually argue that this is probably the number one thing, especially moving into the midterms. Many senators have said, well, if we do this, the Democrats are going to do this when they regain power. But the fact is, Maria, is that the Senate Democrats have made it very clear that they want mass amnesty. They want mass naturalization of illegals. And frankly, I think they're going to do it anyways. And so the only way to really secure our country for future generations is to ensure that Americans have faith in the voting process, and that if their senators work against their interests, that they can vote them out at the ballot box. And that's exactly what this will do. So I am frankly behind every senator that is for the voter ID. I think that Senator Fetterman will likely vote for it as well. Again, thank you to Senator Collins, but Thune needs to bring it to the floor, and it needs to happen immediately.
But look, I mean, this talking filibuster has never been used. You just heard the senator from Tennessee, Senator Hagerty, say they...
At this point, several major claims are being made. First, the assertion that America has made their voices clear on voter ID reflects polling that often shows broad support for identification requirements in principle. Though support can vary depending on how questions are framed and what specific provisions are included. Second, the reference to mass amnesty and mass naturalization is a political characterization. Immigration reform proposals historically involve complex eligibility rules and lengthy processes, not automatic citizenship. There's also an important procedural issue here, the filibuster. Traditionally, senators were required to hold the floor and speak continuously, the so-called talking filibuster. Over time, Senate rules evolved, allowing filibusters to function more as a procedural threshold requiring 60 votes for cloture. So when lawmakers debate reviving the talking filibuster, they're really debating how difficult it should be to advance legislation in a closely divided chamber. The bigger question may be this: is this push primarily about election policy, or is it also about drawing clear contrasts ahead of midterm campaigns? How do you interpret the timing?
Are examining it right now.
Look, I would actually argue back with him and politely correct him in that the talking filibuster was actually how the filibuster did work historically. And then there came kind of this perversion of what it's currently known as. And I would say, look, Maria, you have only a few jobs in Congress. One is to argue your ideas and the other is to vote. And so if they're saying that, you know, it's all these procedural hurdles and they have to allocate time for it and they might not have the ability to do that debate, I would say, look, you're in the Senate. It's a wonderful job. It's a privilege and you should get to it. And so I would say that they need to actually embrace what the filibuster was, get back to what it traditionally stood for. And I think that every single member of a House and Senate that debates this issue will see that the American people bipartisanly want this, even Democrats. So if Democrats are watching this, the Republican Party is going to deliver on this for you. So remember that when you vote in the midterms.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't they want secure elections? And the way that they talk about it is that the SAVE Act is the opposite. I mean, the other day, Chuck Schumer said it is dead on arrival when it gets to the Senate.
Yeah, look, Chuck Schumer also said that people that were pushing it, like myself, Maria, I'm sure you saw that I was threatening to shut down the government over this. But, you know, he was saying that it was Jim Crow era laws. And what's so ironic about that is that, you know, that the Democrat Party was the party that did champion that. But I politely said and corrected them in that there's a famous piece of footage of Barack Obama showing voter ID to vote. In order to even vote on the House floor, you have to have voter ID. We actually have a card that has our identification on it. And so this whole argument argument, I think, is to try to really radicalize the blue anons. That's what I call these conspirators that think that President Trump is going to steal the midterms. You can see that many Democrats are starting to message on that currently. But again, this is one of the most bipartisan popular issues on the same level, I think, as banning insider trading. And so I think that if we champion these, if Thune moves forward and brings us to the floor, which he has every ability to do so, if he embraces the talking filibuster, I think that this is a massive, massive win for the country and for generations to come.
Well, Congressman, real quick before you go, the Department of Homeland Security was not funded. The Democrats would not agree. We are now in a partial shutdown for the Homeland Security Department, certainly. How long will this last?
I don't think it's going to last too long, because you're seeing TSA is now going to start having issues with travelers. And then also, too, look, I have many Coast Guard units in my district, and those service members are not getting paid. But again, what they're trying to do is they're lying to the American people, saying that this is somehow going to affect ICE operations, and it's not. And so I think it's a losing argument for them. But you'll see them probably start to pivot to the voter ID, and we're going to get that done. I have faith.
This exchange highlights how election policy, Senate procedure, and budget negotiations can quickly converge into a broader political narrative, especially in an election year. Supporters frame voter ID as a safeguard for confidence in elections. Opponents argue that access and civil rights concerns must be weighed carefully. At the same time, debates over filibuster reform and agency funding show how legislative strategy often shapes outcomes as much as ideology does. Ultimately, the larger issue may be public trust, not just in elections, but in institutions themselves. Do you see this as a necessary reform, a political strategy, or something in between? Share your perspective in the comments. If you value fact-based, balanced analysis like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next in-depth breakdown.